Welcome to part two. So let's continue where we left off. Let's continue with our regular expression, with our practical. So we were done with the regular expression, right? So since we're now done with the regular expression, I don't think I'm gonna need this, but let me just leave it there just in case. So let's start coding now. Comes the not so nice part, coding, right? We did all of this work. Let's see now if everything is gonna work. So let's see. And remember that in all of your practicals, the main class is not gonna it's always gonna be in a default package. You don't package it, right? So let me show you how to do it. So we are done with this. I don't need to reference any of those things. So I'm gonna say new, right? I'm gonna create a class. If you don't want the class to be placed inside a package, right? You just go to the source folder. Remember, source folder, it's where all of your source code is. Basically, all of your .java classes or the Java files are. Because everything saved in a .java extension or yeah, the Java extension is something that is code, right? You've written code inside of it, right? So I'm gonna say class. So when it's like this, it's gonna use the default. You see the package, it's gonna use the default. It's gonna use the default. So the main class is always gonna use the default package. I'm not gonna use say constructors, whatever. I'm just gonna set which method stubs would you like to create? Which methods would you like to have? I would like to have a main method because this is a main class. And then I'm gonna click finish and then done. There we go. There's my main class. And it's in a default package. Let's leave the main for now. It's something that we're gonna do last. We're gonna do it at the end. So let's do a package, right? So our package is supposed to be xc.csc2a, which is computer science 2a dot file. Is it .fmb, right? Dot file. I think it's like this, or dot model. Let's see. Yeah, .fmb dot file. So that's where it should be placed. And then bam, there we go. And then I'm gonna right click and then I'm gonna say new, and then I'm gonna add a class. Remember, they said we should create a class in that package. So I've already read the instructions. So display file handler class, copy that name that they want me to use and paste. Don't say main method. Don't be selecting things that are not applicable to that class. Remember, this class is meant to display, to read from the file and check if the line matches with whatever we're looking for, etc. And then finish. And then there we go. We have our files, right? So let me zoom out a bit. Just that my screen's size is a bit small. I think it's like a 14-inch. Yeah. Just bear with me. So let's see. With okay, the main class, okay, they said create, the class must have a read display method, right? So the way I'm gonna do it, right? The way I will approach it, right? The way I'll approach it is I will use the static method because remember I need to call it inside my main. And inside main, you have to use the keyword static. Remember, static means that there's one copy in memory. So that's what static means. And when you use static, it means you can call it without creating an instance of the class or without creating an object. So what do I mean without creating an object? So you can call that function without using the keyword new. You just use the name of the class. Let's say the name of the class is display file handler, right? And then you say dot, and then you call the method. So that's how you would call it. So let me just undo that. So I'm just gonna make things simple for myself because I'm not getting anything via constructor, anything. So I'm just gonna make it a static method. Basically meaning that there's one copy, basically meaning that the file, that the class that the method that I want to call inside of another class, I can call it using its name. I don't have to create an instance of that class. I just type down the name of the class, dot, and then I call the method within that class. So public static, right? And they said it should, let's see, it should return, yeah, it returns a firework display instance. You must pay attention to details. So it's a value returning function. It returns something, returns a value. It returns a firework display instance, right? And it's called the read display like this, right? So if you see something like this, it has that issue or whatever. Remember, this is in the jar file. The firework display is in the jar file. There it is here. If I double click on it, there's the firework display. But I have to import it because these are two different packages. You see, this is fmb.file that I'm in. This is inside fmb.model. So I have to import. So I have to click import, and then there's the import statement generated for me. For now, so that it complains that I haven't returned anything, I'm just gonna return now. We'll get back to we'll get back to that. So let's see, it must take in a file name as a parameter. Reads through each of the file, each line of the file, and test for validity. So you should take in a file name, right, as a parameter. So they said it should take a file name. Okay, yeah. So just be careful to read the instructions. If it says it must take in it takes in a file name as a parameter, that means it literally takes in the file name, right? So the file name being the file name, like a string, it takes in a string. If they had said a file handle, that means you have to pass in a file handle like this. If they said a file handle, but they said it's a file name. So the name is a string, so I'm gonna say file name like this, right? So it's gonna be file name, right? So it must take in a file name. We did take in the file name, not the file handle. If they said file handle, then I would have to create a file. So just be careful with the instructions. If if they meant file handle, then that'll be that'll be on their end. They made the mistake. It's not our fault. We didn't make that mistake. And just remember, it needs to return a firework display instance, right? So I'm gonna create a local firework display instance that I'm gonna return, right? So I'm gonna say firework display, and then I'm gonna call it fwork display for firework display. And then I'm gonna do that, and then I'm just gonna return it at the end, firework display. fwork display. It is gonna complain that I didn't initialize it. So let's see. You should normalize reading the jar file with the coders there. Look at the constructors. How many constructors are there? So we have a default constructor. There is a parameterized constructor. There's many ways you can go about doing it. Don't want to lie, there's just many ways of going about doing it. There's many ways. Like there's a lot of ways. So the way that I'm gonna do it is I'm gonna call this default construct, right? So that's how I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna initialize it here and say new firework display, and then use the default construct. It was just complete, like it's actually not instantiated, or it's not, you didn't create an instance of, you didn't allocate memory for it, right? So that's why it was complaining. We will get into this in more depth, but let's see. Let me show you. Remember, when you use the keyword new, it gets allocated on what we call a heap. A heap, that's where all objects are stored. Remember, this is an object. This is a class. If you go here, this is what? Class. So it's an object. So it's stored, it's allocated on what we call a heap. A heap is just a fancy name for shelves. Each shelf is a label that's how it works. So let me demonstrate it in simple terms. Draw.io. So let me show you a simple illustration of how it looks. I really don't care what name I use here. I really don't care. I just want to demonstrate. So this is how the heap works. So this is you can imagine this is the heap, right? It's like this. Yeah, this is the heap. And then I'm gonna put a label there. And then I'm gonna increase the text style, and then I'm gonna make it bold. And then yeah, that should be fine. How come it's not allowing me to change? Oh, this is the heap, right? So that's the heap. And then within the heap, you have shelves, right? To store or memory locations. So, but I'll just call them shelves. These are just shelves, right? This is very important to understand because when you get to arrays, if you don't know what you're doing, you'll be in serious trouble. You need to be able to know what you're doing. So this is the heap, right? There's many shelves. There's infinite shelves. Then let's make it orange. So this is the heap, right? So when you say new, right? Let's look at new. Where's this line of code? So when you use the keyword new, you're saying create an you're saying allocate memory for an object from the heap and then return the reference and store the reference to this variable called fwork display. A reference just means an address. So when I say reference, I'm saying that's an address. A reference is just an address. Okay, so let me, just in case you guys, so I'm just gonna write my author. The author's name, which is my name. And then I'm gonna say at version. What's the version? It's practical 03 memo, right? So I'm just gonna write my name and the practical. I think I should extract it as a jar file. I'll see who get to that. And then I'm gonna share it as a jar file instead. So let's see. I think yeah, you can't edit. So I'm gonna share it as a jar file. So I don't want you to edit. So I'm gonna share it as a jar file so that you just read. It's meant to be read only. You don't do many things there and try to change my code and try to copy and do my code there. And if you copy it, you'll be in serious trouble because I can sue you because that's my intellectual property. Just saying. So let's look at it. So when you use the keyword new, right? What new means, it means create a new space here. So let's say this, allocate memory for this. So let's say this it gets allocated memory, right? Let's say when you see when you use that keyword new, right? This is what happens. It says okay, allocate so it's gonna say allocate memory. Let's say it's like um let's say it depends on how many integers and functions and all those things that you have in your class. But let's just say it's like 32 bits, right? It is allocated memory, right? In memory, it's like your cold drinks, like let's say 2 liters, right? You should be able to store something that's maximum 2 liters, something like that. So it has allocated memory, right? And choose a shelf to allocate that memory, any random shelf. So it's going to choose a random shelf, store the memory. That's what new does. And then return that the assignment operator or the equal sign. What it does now, it says take the address or the reference of that shelf and store it inside fwork display. So that's why we're calling it an object because it's referencing an object. This fwork display is now a So fwork display is not, we can't call it a primitive type. We can't call it a variable. It's not a variable, it's a reference variable or a reference type. It's a variable of a reference type. So reference meaning that it has an address, it references a location. It has an address for a specific location. So it says, okay, there's the create an address, allocate memory, and then create an address, and then take that in a specific address, and then take that address, the address of that shelf, and store it inside this variable called fwork display. So now it's gonna come here and create fwork display. Remember, this line of code, right? Fwork display from here to here. I am creating a variable of type fwork display of a class type. So it's gonna be, oh, it's a it's not called a reference type. It's a wrapper. It's a wrapper. I would say it's a wrapper type. It wrapper. Is it wrapper classes or wrapper type? Something like that. But it references a class, a wrapper type or a reference type. You can still say a reference type because it a reference variable, a reference type. The reference is an object. It's a reference type. It's not really a variable. We can't say it's a variable. It stores an address, so it's a reference type. So it comes here and says, okay, you want me to create a variable named um, okay, it's big enough. So it's going to be named fwork display, and then this should now point to what? This now point to that memory location. So now I have an address I'm pointing to, that memory allocation that's been allocated in the heap, right? Don't worry about the uh, deallocation and whatnot. Everything is done automatically by Java. The garbage collector is going to come and collect and say, okay, this is no longer being used. Delete that pointer. So it's going to come there and delete that point. But for now, this is what we have. That one line of code, that's what it did. And this object that I've created, it's of that type, right? It's a firework display type. So it's going to have all the things that I have inside firework display. I can reference all these methods: add firework, remove firework. This is private. Grow firework is private, private. Anything that's public. There's print display when you have to display. There's get display ID, get display name, get this, get that, all of that. I have that because now this is a reference type. It references an object, right? Sitting in memory, sitting on that's in memory. That means it has been allocated on the heap. So let's start. Let's start coding. So I just wanted to show you how it looks in memory. That's how it looks in memory. So let's see. So it reads through each line of the file and tests for validity. So let's see how you read the line, right? So okay, let me just do this, minimize that so that you can see my full Eclipse application. So let's start coding, right? So what I'm gonna do, right, outside of this class, there's two ways to go about it, but I'm just gonna show you one way for now. But there's two. Let me just show you the both ways. So there's this way where we set the scanner to null, right? We set the scanner to null. We just do this. Yeah, we create a scanner variable, right? Remember the scanner. It's like the scanner that you use to scan the barcode. When you're shopping at Pick and Pay or Woolworths, wherever you buying your food. Remember that there's that scan for QR, for barcode, QR code, whatever, the scan. You see the scan. So they took from that concept of the scan. Remember what the scanner does. Don't forget, don't delete your regular expressions. We're gonna need them. So remember the scan, what it does. You have some barcode here. It scans, right? It goes like this. It goes and then it scans everything. So the same thing with the scanner. It's gonna scan everything we're going to use to scan the file. So let's do that. But remember that with files, there's things that can go wrong. There's an exception. An exception is basically something that happened that was an exception, right? It wasn't. It was something that there's different types of um, exceptions. That there's I can phrase it in this way. There's exceptions that we expect to occur and the exceptions that we don't expect to occur. We don't know. But there's an exception, there's something that can go wrong. For example, you are creating an application, right? It's supposed to get in take two numbers, right? A and B, right? And then return A divided by B. The exception is that someone can enter a value of 0 for B. And division by 0 is not possible, right? You know that you can't divide by 0, right? So you'd have to do a try exception block. So try exception block, what it means try like this. So try whatever is here and then catch whatever exception is occurred. So what exception can occur for file handling? The exception that can occur is what we call a file not found exception. EX. So when you happen to look for the file and you didn't find it, and just import that to get over that issue. So you happen to look for the file, but you couldn't find it. So that's the exception that can happen. Just like here, I happen to get an integer from the value and let me rephrase what I was saying. You happen to get a value from the user, which is 0, right? And that was an exception. It's something that you didn't expect to happen. You didn't expect to happen, right? Because you assumed that the user of the application was intelligent enough to know that division by 0 is not allowed. But you don't want the program to crash because what happens is that the program is going to crash. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So if I do this, right? If I say 2 divided by 0, this is integer division, but yeah, it's not really important. And the thing that I want to demonstrate is division, right? Division by 0, exception handling. So Java C main dot Java, and then run my application. So Java main exception. You see, it says division by 0. So an exception is occurred. What type of exception is occurred? An arithmetic exception. An exception that has to do with arithmetic, which is addition, division, multiplication, all of those things, dealing with numbers basically. So how do we avoid this? So the way we can avoid this, right? So let me just say I had something like this, right? So this is integer division, right? So I'm just gonna say int answer is equals to 2 divided by 0, right? Let's say I wanted to divide and store the answer into a variable called answer and then display the variable answer. So what I can do now, right? So let me see. It doesn't offer what I'm looking for. So system dot out dot print line and then print the answer, right? So this is what I'm trying to execute, but it's not going to execute because division by 0 is not allowed. So how do I go about? I don't want imagine right using an application and this happens. It's untied. It makes no sense to the user. Remember, the client has no coding experience. They just use your application. So I have to give my application meaning. It needs to be an error that makes sense. So what I can do is I can take the line that's gonna result in my code not running, right? The code that's gonna raise an exception. We call this, you see, when it outputs an exception like this, we're saying that it has raised an exception. This line will raise an exception. This won't raise an exception because it's just meant to display. So if you notice, it's gonna terminate here. It never got to line 4 where it's supposed to display. So I'm gonna take this and cut and then say try. Let me see, try. Yeah, try. And then try like this, and then I'm gonna place my code in there. So Control V. So this is the code that's gonna have an issue. That I only put the code. You don't put the whole application inside the try block. You don't do that. You only put the code that's gonna raise an exception. So what code is gonna raise an exception? I mean, you could put the whole line, but technically it's not allowed. You can it makes no sense for you to do that. So try, right? So try which line is gonna raise an exception? This line, division by 0. So there's the code, right? I'm trying to divide. So if it happens, remember this was an arithmetic. Let's check what exception is. Arithmetic exception. I need to say arithmetic exception. If you just leave it as an exception, right? It just handles all exceptions, any exception that you get in. It's still fine, but I want to be specific in my program for the other developers so that they know what went wrong, if something went wrong. And then here I could do this. I could say e.print stack trace. So just print the stack trace, the stack, how it looks when I get that issue. But I don't want that because that's for the programming. Let me show you what I mean. Um, okay, cannot find that symbol. Let's fix that issue. So it can't find the symbol because it was declared within the try block. This is a topic on variable scope. So as long as it's within these curly braces, it means it's only within that scope. If I've declared it within those curly braces, within that scope. So there it is. So there's my variable. I'm going to declare it outside so that it's also available here. So that's the only thing I changed. So let's run it again. Cannot find symbol or variable. Okay. I'm not coding it inside. Okay, so I just need to input output, right? So I'm just gonna need to say import java.io.arithmetic exception. And then let's try again because it doesn't know what exception is. Cannot find symbol. This thing, okay, now it's starting to piss me off. I don't know why, because this is exactly the same thing that I did. Okay, let me do this. Let's do this. Let's try this. Let me just leave it as exception. And then still doesn't want to work. So cannot find symbol. I don't know why it can't find the symbol. This thing is mad. So, but at the end of the day, it's gonna print an error. We will see it when we do it here. I guess I just have to show it after reading the file. So there's the code. So whatever code is here, it's the code that's bound to create an error, right? To generate an error. So let's see. Let's test it out. Let me say, remember scan to instantiate a scan object, you have to say new scanner and then pass the thing that you want to read. I want to read a file. So I'm gonna say new file like this and then file name. Remember, I need to create a file handle. I can't just and then why is it doing that? Is it java.io.file? Okay, let me do this. Let me create a file handle. File handle is equals to new file, file name. Will that, okay, now it's gonna import. This thing is mad, but it's fine. I just want it to be like this, but you could also write it like this and just say file handle and then create handle. So remember what a file handle is. A file handle is nothing but a way for a connection. We are creating a connection to the file that we want to read. That's what a file handle is. That's what this class does. It just helps us to create that connection. So it's like this, right? We've already did this, so I don't have to explain that. So what file handle does, right? It's like the middleman, right? Imagine we have this file, right? It creates a connection, which is a means for us to be able to uh, communicate with our file, right? So I'm just gonna do this, and then let's say this is our file, right? So it's clean underscore one.txt, right? So there's the file. So there's the file, right? It has some gibberish in there, some text, whatever, right? So with the file handler, what it does, right? This is what it does. Let me show you. How will I demonstrate this? Um, so this is like the file handle here. There's no way we can reference the file, read the file without creating a file handle, because what the file handle does, it establishes the connection between to the connection to the file. So you see, so here when you create a file handle, this is the file handle, this is the file, and then we can call functions within the file handle to manipulate this file. So that's how it works. It helps us to establish that connection. So it's like the middleman. It's in between our file. So we can just go straight to the file. There needs to be a file handle, a connection made to the file. And then we use that connection to to do something to our file. So so this is the file. You see, when I say new file, the file name might not exist. So that's why there's a file not found exception. And I'm just gonna say I can just print the stack trace like this. That's fine. Or I can just say sys error system.error. This is to output errors. It's going to be in red. This is to say file does not exist, so that the user knows. We need to have a finally block, right? Remember what I said when we talked about scan, the scanner class. It needs to be closed. We need to close that connection once we are done using it, right? So I need to make sure, remember I've initialized it to null. So if I try to access, if I say, if I try to say scan.close and my scan object is null, so it released to a null pointer exception. So I'm trying to access something that's not pointing to anything. Remember, this is a class. It starts with an uppercase letter. So and it uses the keyword new. So it's a reference type. No, it's here. It uses the keyword new, so it's a reference type. So it's pointing to something in memory. So it's like this. It's pointing. It's pointing to something in memory on the heap, like this. So it allocates space. Could be, you can view it in terms of like liters, 500 milliliters, 1 liter, 2 liter, 5 liter. You can view it in terms of that. Like that's how it's like that's the amount of space it needs to allocate, right? And then it's gonna allocate the right space. You don't have to worry about how much space, how many bits it needs to allocate, or how many bytes. You don't have to worry about that. It will calculate it for you. It handles everything automatically. So remember, this is a new, so it's a reference type. So when you say close, and you see, you know what, now when you set it to now, right? This is in essence what you're doing. You're saying here, come here, and then increase this, then increase this, and then this is the scan. This is the scan reference variable, right? Or the reference type, right? It has a reference. So when it's pointing to null, this is what it means. Null, it means it's not pointing to anything. So if I'm trying to use this object and say scan.close, close what? What am I trying to close? It's not pointing to anything. So that's why we need to make sure that this is not null. That means it's not pointing to nothing before we try to close it. Let's make sure it's pointing to something. So I say if scan is not equals to null, And remember this when you did if statements, right? If there's one line of code or the body part of the if statement, if it's only one line, you can omit the curly braces. You don't have to put that. It's just one line. That's the part of the syntax of Java. So I want to what? Close my scan reference. Or you can, there's many ways to kill the cat, or you can just do this. You can just write it in one line. Still fine. So I'm just going to write it like this. It's still fine, still one and the same thing. So we have a scanner object and we made sure that it's not fine. Remember finally what it does. It executes regardless whatever is executed at the top. So at the end of the day, finally means well, once you're done with everything that you're doing at the top there, don't forget to close the scan reference. As long as it's not null, as long as it's pointing to something. If it's pointing to something, then close that connection so that there's no dangling pointers or there's no, yeah, just close the connection. Java, the garbage collector would automatically close it, but we don't want to take that risk. We don't want to depend on someone to come and close the things. We want to close it ourselves. So there we go. We have our try except block, right? So that's what I'm gonna do. I think this should be fine. This can create a file, even if it doesn't exist. But when you try to scan like this and it doesn't exist, it becomes a problem. You don't have to put all of your code inside the try. Like I said, you only put the condition, the part that's gonna cause the code not to compile. So let's do that. Let's try displaying, right? So let me call my display. Let's just test it and see. Display file handler dot read display. And then remember that your file is in a folder. It's in a data folder. Remember your files are in a data folder. So you need to say go to the data folder. And remember Windows uses backslash. And in strings, you have to use 2 backslashes. In Java, that's the format. You have to escape that backslash. If you remember the escape sequences that we did. So you always put 2 backslashes, followed by the file that you're looking for. Let's name a file that's not there. Let's see if it's gonna work. You see, file does not exist. So we tried to create a scanner object here, and it took in a file handle, which referred to that file. So the question is, which line is really causing this issue? Let's do this. So it's the scan. So like I said, the file handle does not have any issues there. So we can just do this. The file handle, I can just declare it outside here because it doesn't cause any issue. But let's say we did have the correct file. Let me say clean underscore one, right? And then let's run. Where's the terminal? Okay, there's the terminal. Yeah, it's running. Wait, did it run? Oh, what? Yeah, it ran, but there's no error because everything was fine. The file does exist. So we are done. We've placed the code. We've pasted only the code that's going to cause an error. But another thing that that's gonna force us, that I've noticed, that's gonna force us to group everything in the try is this finally. If down here I try to write some code here, I've already closed the connection. So in this case, this is the only exception, but don't normalize grouping all of your code in the try except try catch block. Only in this scenario, it's mandatory for us to do everything in the try block. So let's read the line, right? So what I like about scanner class, right? It has a very efficient, it is a very good, it has very good functions, right? So look at the question. It says it reads through each line of the file. So it means each line, literally all the each line, not each string or each day, each object or each what. No, each line. So next line. So I'm gonna say I'm gonna use a while loop because there's gonna be more than one line, right? So and I don't know exactly how many lines. So that's why I'm using a while loop. If I knew exactly how many lines, then I would use a for loop because the for loop it's a it's an iteration of when it's a fixed number of iterations. It's fixed. The while loop is not fixed. You don't know how many iterations you're gonna take or how many times you're gonna loop. You don't know how many times you're gonna loop. With the while loop, with the for loop, you know. With the while loop, you don't know. So that's why I'm gonna use the while loop. And while loop takes in a condition. So while what? While scan dot has. There's a has next as next line. There's a function called has next line. The has next line, if you look at it, it returns true if there is another line in the input of the scan. So it's gonna check do I still have a next line to read? If I have, continue reading. When there's no more lines to read, stop. So once we have read the lines, now I'm gonna do what? Once I've created the condition for my while loop, I'm gonna read the line. I'm gonna read each line and then check if each line matches with the regular expression so that I know which object am I supposed to create. Is it a firework display, a pyrotechnician object, and so forth. So let's read the line. So string, I'm gonna create a string reference and then is equals to scan. Then there's next reads in the next string, right? But we don't want the next string, we want the next line, we want the whole line. So next line like this. So we have the scan.next line. It reads the whole line, right? Remember, it reads a line at a time. And then next line, we have the line, right? There's one thing that I want to make sure: trim the line. So trim basically removes any. Remember our regular expressions, right? Remember, if you had any space there, any extra space or unnecessary space there, or carriage return, anything there, it stops matching. So in order for me to remove all those things, I can trim. Trim, it's like literally trimming the edges, right? I'm trimming the edge. I'm trimming the edge on this side. It trims both edges, this side, and then let's say this was the case. There were spaces on both sides. So I would trim the edge, it will remove the white space on the right hand side, and also removes and trims the white space on the left hand side. And then there you go. It's gonna match properly. So I'm trimming and removing all white space characters on both ends. So I'm gonna do line dot trim like this. Uh, okay, let me fix that. Yeah. So this removes white space characters on both ends, on both sides. So it's like you're trimming the edges. For females out there, you are doing your edges, right? You do your edges on the left hand side and the edges on your right hand side, right? So it's the same concept here. You are doing your edges. Oh, this is a while loop. I removed that thing. Closing curly brace. So this is what this does. So I'm trimming the line, and then after trimming it, I'm storing it back into the same variable. I don't want to have to come here and say string and declare another. I want to reuse the same variable. So I've trimmed the line. I made sure that my edges are, for the females out there, I know I want to make sure my edges they're on point. I'm doing both sides, but the left hand side and the right hand side. I'm trimming my edges. So that's what we're doing there. We're making sure that the edges look good. There's no white space. There's nothing that's not supposed to be there, right? So we've trimmed everything. Now we have to create. Now we come to regular expressions. How do I do regular expressions in Java? So this is how you do it. You're gonna create patterns, right? So I'll say create and initialize the patterns, right? So which patterns you want. So this is how you initialize, right? You call the pattern class, it's a pattern class. So I'm the first pattern, right? I'm just gonna name my variables based on the objects that I have. I have firework display. So I'm gonna call this one firework display pattern. It's very long. That's unnecessary. So I'm gonna call it F display pattern to keep it short, And then I'm gonna say it's equals to, and then remember when we talked about static, right? Static. It means that I don't have to create an instance. Just like with the pattern class, I don't have to create an instance. There is a static method in the pattern class that that compiles or initializes my regular expression. How do I call it? I say pattern, it's called compile. And then it takes in a string, which is a regular expression. So I just double click on it, and then I just put string double quotation marks there. And then I repeat this step 3 times because I have 3 patterns that I want to match. There's the F display, and then there's the fire work pattern. Then we have the technician pattern, so tech pattern. I'm going to call it tech pattern. So this is a pattern that I want to compile. But I need to compile. I need to take this the compile function. It takes in the input, which is a string, which is a regular expression. So now our regular expressions that we have been writing, they come this way, they come into place now. You copy and paste it there. Don't worry about, you see, it always has to add an extra escape character. That's something you don't have to really worry about. You just copy and paste. Trust me, it's gonna work perfectly fine. Just copy and paste. And then let's copy and paste the second one for the pyrotechnician, right? So this is for the pyrotechnician. So tech pattern, that one goes there. And then for the firework is the last one. This is the one with the colors and stuff. So copy that whole line and then paste it. So what the compile function does just says, okay, take this regular expression. I'm going to use it because I want to check if my lines, the lines or the input that I'm getting from anywhere, it could be a file. In this case, it's a file. It could be the console. I want to check if the input matches with this pattern. So in order for me to check if the input matches with this pattern, I need to create what we call a matcher, because it's like you're on Tinder there. It's matchmaking, right? I want to create a matcher there. So it's something like that. So let's create matches for all of our patterns, right? Let's create matches for all of our patterns. So let's do so. Let's do, okay, let me, the brightness. So let's create matches, right? To match make, the patterns with the right to see if the patterns match with what we're looking with the line that we're looking for. So I need to create matches for them. So matcher, I'm also going to call it F display so that there's consistency. F display matcher, which is going to take this pattern, right? That pattern there. Remember, it needs to correspond. I'm creating an F display matcher, which is a firework display matcher. So the firework display matcher, it needs to look at the firework display pattern. And then I check if the pattern matches with the line that I'm looking for, or the string that I'm looking for. Here, I'm just going to call there's this function called matcher, right? The matcher function, it takes in a character sequence, which is a string that you want to match. So I call matcher, and it needs to take in a line. Remember, we need to match the lines. So it's going to take in a line, and the matcher is going to check if they match. So let's do that. So let's create other matchers, right? To do the matchmaking for us on our Tinder account, right? So I have firework matcher, and then I'm going to call firework pattern, and then call the matcher to match with that pattern. Which pattern? This regular expression. So that's what we're going to check. But now we'll get to how we check if it matches. We're going to get to that right now. Just be patient a bit. And then this one, I'm just going to call it tech matcher. And then it takes in a line. So now let's see how we check if the patterns match. It's very simple. You're just going to do if statements. If this matcher matches, I call my matcher and say if it matches. So it matches, it means that this line matches with that regular expression, right? This line matches with that pattern. So if it matches, then I know I have found a line that has a firework display, right? Then I know I've met a line that has a firework display. So if it happens, there's many ways you can approach this problem. I don't want to lie, there's many ways. So the way I'm going to approach it, right? You could, outside of the while loop, right? So that you don't lose the data, you could create all of your strings outside, all the variables to store the information that you're reading from the file. What I'm going to do, right? I'm going to look at my firework display class. So let's look at the firework display class. Do I have setters for all of these things? I do. I have set display ID, set display name, and set display theme. So I will call those functions. So I don't have to worry about trying to remember. I don't have to worry about trying to make sure that the strings that I declared are not declared within the while loop, because if I've declared within the while loop, that means I'm gonna keep overriding my information and stuff. So here I'm just gonna go with the flow. So remember, let's look at the format, right? Let's open our file. This is where opening the file really helps. So we have all three of them are strings, so we don't have to worry about that. So all three of them are strings, so I don't have to worry about it. So okay, before we do this, remember that we have an issue here. We need remember, this is just one line, but I want to, the question is, how do I extract this value and then also extract this value and also extract this value? How do I extract the different values? This is where something very beautiful in Java comes into play. Something called a string tokenizer. So what are tokens? Tokens is just a string, right? It's just a string. So a token is the thing is the string that we get back after separating. So what happens is it's going to create a string array, right, of values. That's what it's going to do when you use the string tokenize. So how will it create the string of values? It looks for a token, right? So let's say this is hey, hello, and then this is hi, followed by a value, followed by a character C, something like this. So what would be the string, how would I divide the tokens? Let me just put this. So the tokens are separated by what we call a hyphen. So the way you could separate this into an array of strings, you could use a string, something called a string tokenizer. So you say string tokenizer like this, and then you say tokens, right? So tokens just going to be that string, that array of strings, right? So I'm just going to say new, and then call the string tokenizer constructor, which takes in two things: the string or the line that you want to divide into tokens, followed by the separator. Where should it stop? What's going the delimit? It's called a delimiter. It's not a separator, it's called a delimiter. Delimiter meaning that delimit or limit or stop at this specific thing. What thing should I stop at? So it's going to take in some line, some string, right? Comma, some line, comma, followed by the delimiter, which is a string. What delimiter is it going to be? It's going to be a hyphen. So what happens is that it's going to go here. It's going to be like, oh, there's H, E, what, and then it sees a hyphen and it stops. So it extracts hello. So hello will be now stored at index 0. Remember, arrays are 0 index. And then it's going to look for the next token. Oh, hi, there's hyphen stop. So it just extracts hi. So it's just going to do that. Keep doing that. Extract 2, extract C, and so forth. So that's how it's going to extract. But remember, in our file, we don't have hyphens. We have tabs. So we have this. We have tabs instead of hyphens. So that's the delimiter that we're going to use for string tokenizer to divide the string into tokens. So let's do that. So let's create a string tokenizer here. So create a string tokenizer to divide string into tokens. So I'm going to initialize a string tokenizer here. String tokenizer that's going to store tokens, right? And then create a new string tokenizer, which is going to take 2 inputs. The string that you want to divide into tokens or into an array of strings. And there's many ways you can do it. There's many ways. I don't want to lie, there's many ways. You could use split method in the split method, right? In the string class. Remember, string is the class. The split method, it returns an array of strings. So you could say something like this. You wanted to divide this into an array of strings. You could say string, then values, right? And then say is equals to that line that you want to split that one string, and then call the split method, right? And then pass the regular expression here, or a delimiter that you want to split by. I want to split by hyphens. So I need to extract everything before each hyphen. So it's gonna stop at that hyphen and then look for the next information, stop at that hyphen, look for the next information, stop at that hyphen, look for the next information. And then we're gonna end up have an array of these values. So to show you what I'm talking about, let's just do it. I want you to see what I'm talking about, that I'm not lying. So let's say we have a string, right? This is a line and it has hello, hi, to C, like this, right? And I'm gonna use the split method, right, from in the string class to split into values is equals to line dot split, followed by what's the delimiter? What delimiter means? Where am I going to stop extracting these values? So I should stop whenever I see a hyphen because they're all separated by a hyphen. So I'm gonna pass the hyphen there. And then now I can do a for loop. So let's do a for loop, right? So for loop starts at starts at index 0, while I is less than values dot length, right? And then I plus plus. And then I'm gonna print system dot out dot print line. So remember, the print line is also gonna have a line field. So every new output is gonna be displayed on its own line, on a new line. Then I'm gonna say values and then index into my array at index I. And then let's run it. So clear screen. So let's compile it and then run it. So there it is. There's hello, I, to, C, etc. So you could technically use a split. There's 2 ways to go about it. So let me use a tab. Let's see if a tab can work. Let me put a tab there, tab, tab. So they're all separated by tabs, right? Let me put a tab. Okay, they're all separated by tabs, right? So I'm gonna put a tab there and say the delimiter is gonna be the tab. Let's see if it's gonna work. It also does work. Um, let me see. No, it doesn't really work. So yeah, it's because it's not outputting on a new line, just like here. So yeah, when it comes to tabs and things like that, you are actually forced to use what is this? Let me see. do I have to escape it like this? Let's try like this, because Java also has that thing of, okay, it's still the same. So yeah, you just, if it has a tab or a white space or things like that, just use a string tokenizer. It's more efficient. Did you see? It works compared to the split method. But the split method has its own advantages too. So remember, we're going to take two values, the line, which is a string, and a delimiter. What's the delimiter? It's a tab. So every time I see a tab, I should stop. I should stop extracting in that specific tab. I've reached basically the delimiter is like it's telling it, oh, once you see a tab, it means stop. You've reached the end of the string. So now, if we look at our string, right, let's look at line 1. If it's a firework display, I'm extracting 3 things. I have 1, 2, 2, which is this, and then 3, which is this. So how do I reference them? So there's this thing called, there's a function called next token. So I'm gonna remember this is the ID is equals to, and then I'm gonna call the tokens. Remember, all the tokens are stored inside this variable, right? This are reference variable. And then I'm gonna say dot next token. So give me the next string. And then string, it's gonna be the name, right? I think it's the name. Yeah, the name and the theme. So name is equals to tokens dot give me the next token. And then the last thing, string, what's the other thing? String theme. So the theme got tokens dot next token, like this, right? So in this order, what it's saying, remember this is divided to tokens. It's in tokens, right? So it's separated. It's like this. We have hello, we have hi. So every time I call next token, it extracts that information. So if I call next token the first time, it extracts this first string. I call it the second time, it extracts the second string. I call the third time, it extracts the third string. I call the fourth time, it extracts the fourth string. So that's how it works. We'll get to the numbers. How, remember this, if you look at the string token, it returns a string. If you check when I was typing, it does return a string. Let me show you. So next, you see it returns a string. So next token string. So remember when I was showing you the firework class, we have setters, methods to set my firework display. Okay, they said you can test it out using this main. Okay, we will test it out using that main. But let's look at the setters. You see, I have setters. There's many ways you can kill the cat. I want to do it this way. I want to use the setters that are in the class. So remember, I have created an instance at the top called fwork display. And then I'm gonna scroll down, and then I'm gonna say fwork display dot set display ID, right? Which takes in that ID that I've extracted as a token from my file. And then fwork.set display name, right? Which takes in the name. And then fwork display dot set display theme, which sets the theme, right? So remember, if this line matches, right? Remember this line, right? It only has 3 things. It doesn't have pyrotechnician. Pyrotechnician, I'm gonna set it later, separate. We'll see if this will work. I just hope it works. We don't have any issues, but it should work. So let's see. So if it matches, and remember that it should be at least one of the lines. All the pattern can match for 3 patterns can match for the same line. That's what I'm trying to say. So I have to create if and else if statements. That if I have if and else if, it means that at least one of these conditions needs to be true. If I do separate if statements, it means I'm checking all of them for every single line, which makes, like, how do I put it? I'm checking for all of them at every single line, and there's no way it's possible that it's all gonna be true or each line is all going to be true. It's going to match the same pattern. Look at the lines. This pattern is not the same as the pattern here. And then this pattern is not the same pattern is the same pattern as the pattern here. So they're not going to be the same. That's what I'm trying to emphasize. It will still work the same, your code, even if you have separate if statement, but there's a different level of understanding if you use an if and else if statement, or you use separate if statements. There's different levels of understanding. One person understands better than the other. So firework, so I'm gonna have firework matcher. And then do that. And then firework matcher, I need to check if I need to call the matches. So if the firework matcher, I call the matches, the matches function, what it does, it says if this line matches with that regular expression, that's what it does. If they match, then do whatever is supposed to be done in the file. So extract the information from the file. So firework, right? This is firework, not firework, firework line, right? It has that in there's those inputs. So let's check. And I need to add the firework, right? Remember, if you check this class, right, it has fireworks, right? It is an array of fireworks. So I need to add fireworks. So I need to come here and say add firework. So I need there's an add firework function. I need to call that function. So what I'm going to do first, right? I need to extract the values and store them into their respective variables, right? So let's check. Let's look at the file. Firework display, right? Where's the no firework? Firework IDs must start with. So that's a string. I already know that that's going to be a string. So the firework ID is going to be a string. So I'm going to say string and then say firework ID is equals to tokens dot next token. So remember what this string tokenizer does, right? Each line is going to split it. So even if it gets to this line, it's going to split it into 1, 2, 3, 4 tokens, 4 values basically. So depending on which matcher matches with on which depending on which line which regular expression the line matches with, the respective tokens will be extracted. So as you can see here, I'm only extracting 3 because it matches with the firework display. The line matches with the firework display, and for the firework display, I only had 3 values. So therefore, I'm only going to extract 3 tokens. For the firework, I have 4 values, so I'm going to extract 4 tokens. Okay, I can just reference the file most. There's the file for the values. So the first value is a string. The second one is a string. So let's also do that. So string. The second one is a firework name. And then I'm going to say tokens dot next token. And then now the challenge comes when you have to when you have something like this. What do we have here? We have a float or a double. But I'm just going to use this is a float would suffice. A float would be fine, to be honest. Float is definitely fine. But let's just use a double. So how do you convert from a string to a numerical data type? It's simple. So let me show you. Double, and then this is a firework. There's a few firework, right? Fuse length. This is a firework fuse length. So this is how you convert from a string to a data type, to a numeric data type. And numeric meaning there's numbers like double, float, int, short, byte, long. Those are numeric data types because they store numerals, they store numbers. So how do you do that? You call the wrapper class. You call the class the class for that primitive type. So for the class for the double, remember the rules of Java. Every class starts with an uppercase. So what would be the class for double? It would be double but with an uppercase. So double and then dot pass. I'm gonna call a pass function. Pass function, what it does. The nice thing about Eclipse, it has documentation. So it returns a new double initialized to the value represented by the specified string. as performed by the value of method of class double. So I take a specific string and I convert it to a double. That's what it does, basically. That's what it's saying. So here I'm gonna need to pass a string. What string? Tokens dot next token. The next token in my file. Remember, this is gonna return the FD something, right? And then this is gonna return the second token, which is the one that starts with the B followed by space and whatnot. And then this, what it's gonna do is gonna return that 1.2, right? So that 1.2, I'm gonna convert it after getting it. So what this line does is gonna take that token 1.2 and then convert it to a double. So that's what's gonna happen behind the scenes. And then we have this interesting fellow here. We have an enum, right? It's an enum, right? Yeah, it's an enum. So we have an enum. So enum is also the same way. And it's called, if you remember in the previous practical, it's called e-color. That's the name. And then I'm gonna just call it color. Or just say firework color is gonna be like this, right? Let me just play like this so that I can import. I just want to import so that it stops moaning at me. So how do you cast now with enums? How do you cast enums? How do you cast from a string to an enum? You use the enum name or the enum data type or the enum data type, right? Which is eColor dot value of. You call the value of function. So it says get the value of that string, which takes in a string. So I'm gonna say token dot next token. So there's the code. So remember, this is gonna get 1.2, and then this is gonna get the yellow or green, whatever value is this value here. It's gonna get yellow and then cast it to an enum type. And to cast a string to an enum, we call the enum data type or the enum name followed by and call the value of function to get the value of that string. So now I have a firework display, right? I have a firework. So let's just double check with the firework class. Let's see the firework class. I want to check something here. Okay, so there's the firework class. There's the firework construct because I want to instantiate the firework and add a firework. Remember that you cannot add something if it's not instantiated. You need to instantiate it first, pass the parameters, then add it. So let's do that. But I'm going to combine it into one class, into one line. But you could separate it. Let's just separate it for its good purpose, right? So I'm going to say firework, right? And then say firework, then say it's equals to new firework, because I said I need to add the firework and then add the fireworks to my firework display. So what input does the constructor take? Is the firework ID. It takes them in that exact order. That's why I maintained that order. And then there's gonna be firework fuse length, and then there's gonna be firework color. And then that's it. You've instantiated a firework, or you've created an instance of a firework. You've created a firework object. Now you can add it to the firework display. So f work display dot add firework, and then press enter. It should autocomplete for you. I want to come on. I want to zoom in. There we go. So you see, it's going to add that firework every time when it matches with this line. We're going to do the same thing, roughly the same thing for our pyrotechnician, right? So our pyrotechnician, remember, it's tech matcher dot matches like this. And then let's look at our tech matcher. It's just two values, two strings. Remember, we can't represent this using an integer because there's hyphens in it. So it's two strings. So I need to extract two strings, which is the name and phone number. So I'm going to have string name is equals to tokens dot next token, right? And then string number or let me just use clear variables, phone number, tokens dot next token. So as you can see, remember what I said about matches. If it matches, then I know exactly how many tokens I should take. That's why the tokens are different. They differ. Firework display, because that line had 3 tokens. If you try to say tokens dot next tokens, it's gonna cause an error because you're trying to extract more than the number of tokens available for that line. Because there's 3 values for the firework display, so I'm gonna extract 3 tokens. There's 4 values for the firework, so I'm gonna extract 3 firework tokens. There's 2 values here, so I'm gonna extract 2 tokens. So let's instantiate a pyrotechnician. Remember, we need to create an instance before we can edit, right? So we need to instantiate it. So new pyrotechnician. So pyrotechnician, or it's an uppercase letter T. I've been making that mistake. And then import. So there we go with the pyrotechnician, right? There's a default constructor. Don't be shocked why it's working and I didn't pass any parameter. There is a default construct, but we want the parameterized one, this one. So this one is a bit tricky, right? This one, they want you to separate. They want the first name and the last name. If you look at the file that we're extracting, right? Let me show you the file again. It stores it as both. And there's a hyphen, it's separated with a hyphen. Then now what comes into place, remember we talked about the split function in the string class. So I'm gonna use that and say string, and then say values, and then say the name. This actually should be called full name, not just name. This is a full name. Full name. And then I'm gonna say full name and call the split. You see, it takes a regular expression, right? So what's the regular expression? The regular expression is that under the hood, the split method uses a pattern and a match. Under the hood, the split method uses that. We could check. It does use under the hood. It does use. So what pattern do we want to look at? If you see a hyphen, split it. So now it's gonna split it, and I'm gonna have 2 values: the name and the surname. So this will be at index 1. This will be at index 0. Remember, the arrays are 0 index or 0 based. So now when I call the constructor, right, I'm gonna call the name, passing the name. Remember, if you look at our pyrotechnician class, it takes the first name and the last name. So the first name is at index 0. So values at index 0, comma, values at index 1, comma, phone number. So phone number, like this. And then now, remember pyrotechnician, right? We still need to add it into our class. There should be an add lead technician function here, or set lead technician. Yeah, there it is. So I need to set it for my firework display class. So fwork display dot set lead technician. So I've set the lead technician, and everything should be fine now. So let's test it out, right? So let me generate Java doc for this thing. So file name is gonna be a string representing the name of the file. And then this should return an instance of firework display class. So I have my Java doc written, everything is fine. So if you check, is it firework display? I think it's firework display. firework display. Oh, this is just testing with the random values. Well, I don't want to test this with random values, so I won't use this function. I'm done with everything. So let's see if it's gonna read. Let's go to our main dot Java. So remember, this function will return an instance of a firework display. So what I would do is I'll say firework display and just call it display, right? And say is equals to. I want to store that instance that's going to be returned by a reference. Remember, this function is going to return a reference. So I want to store that reference that's returned, and then I'll call the display function or the print. What is it called? Print display. Let's go to firework display. Yeah, firework. It's good. This is the right one. Firework display. Um, mm, yeah, print display. It's called print display. We're going to call that function print display. So I'm going to come here and then I'm just going to say display dot print display. It should display the functions and everything, right? But remember, there's something that's missing in our code. Remember, um, handle any exceptions that arise. We did handle exceptions. And there's something, yeah, they say it reads each line of the text for validity. If, excuse me, if the line is not valid, an error message must be printed to the error stream. So that means I should have an else. Remember, there's matches here. I'm checking if it matches with this, if it matches with this. What if it doesn't match with any? That's what they're saying. They're saying you should handle that case. So I should have an else here, and then sys out or system dot out the print line, and then I should just say no. It should be system error because this is an error, not output. It's not just any output. Here I'll say line does not exist, or line does not match with any regular expression. You can phrase it however you want to phrase it. So let's just test it out and see. So there we go. There's something flawed a bit here. We need to fix that. I'll fix it. We'll fix it right now. I think it's my regular expression. But yeah, you see, it did read. So you see, there was a line that did not match. So there's a line that did not match. So you see, there's 1.2, there's the yellow, there's the 0.17. It did read and it did match everything. The issue is here. It should have matched everything for the clean one. The issue is here. That means something's wrong with my regular expression. If you see, when you see it, when you see it and it's not, what is this? And it's not registering or showing the right values or not showing the values at all, just know there's something wrong with the regular expression. So here, what I'm going to do, just to some sort of safe, it's like a safety measure, like, right? I want to see if it does reach this part to check if it does match, right? So I'm going to output a message and say yes. If it did reach the F display, firework display, then yeah, you see, something's wrong with my regular expression because it didn't display. It didn't say yes to show that it did match. So something is wrong with my regular expression for the firework display. Let's just quickly fix it. Let's see, firework display. Oh yeah, remember when you're doing the firework display? Um, we actually, yeah, I made a huge flaw here. So when you're converting back, you must remove all the extra backspaces. You must remove them and then just put one, or else it won't highlight. So let me extract a line from my file, right? So my clean file, this first line is the one that didn't want to extract, right? So there it is. There's the line, but remember, we talked about this. We don't want this, right? This is not safe. So I'm gonna remove that and say from A to Z, what that, and then include a space like that, right? But there should also be a tab here. Okay, it's not highlighting the way I want. No, this is wrong. I mean, I'm looking at the wrong place. But okay, this is fine. Yeah, I'm looking at the wrong place. Yeah, I'm right. I'm looking at the wrong place. So I need to put that space there, and then here I must delete this and then just put a space, and then followed by this, and then followed by a tab. Let's say we remove the tab there. Okay. So yeah. So this is now better. I hope it should match now. Let me just copy it and put it back and change it here and then compile it again. Okay, yeah. Now it has worked. So you see, this is the clean file, so there shouldn't be any lines that are not working. You see, there's the output, everything's working perfectly fine. So the issue here was, remember what I told you about combining? When you combine, it gets confused and stuff. So if you want to say it includes this space, you just put an empty space here, just like that. It's going to include it. Even here, it includes all of these spaces here in between. So that's everything that you're required to do on the practical. Um, I will upload the jar file, and I showed you how to import. You could just check how to import. You just look at the video and see how I imported the jar file. So let's see now. Let's try to run into the batch file. This is where a lot of students things go south. So let's see. Let's open. Let me go to my C drive. Okay, users, and then my username, and then Eclipse workspace. So there's practical 3 memo. Okay, hello world, I don't need that. So practical 3 memo. Okay, let me go inside. Let's go into the docs folder, right? So let's try to run the batch file. It's not gonna work. It shouldn't work. Yeah, it shouldn't work because now you're using a jar file, right? So with a jar file, it only works within Eclipse. You see, it says I can't find it. I don't know what firework display is. It can't find it. It only works within Eclipse, right? So to make it work even outside of Eclipse, work with the batch file. This is how you're gonna have to do it. This is how you're gonna have to do it. Let me show you here. Let me zoom out a bit. You're gonna have to come here to source folder and recreate all of the classes. That's the only way to make it work so that it becomes available. And don't change anything because it's not your code. Copy and paste the code because you just want it to run with the batch file, right? Copy and paste the code and include the author's details. Don't change and write your own details and stuff. Yeah, that's not your code. It's not your intellectual property. So create the package first .mb dot model, right? There's the um there's the package, and then I create an enum. Let me just start with the enum, right? So enum e color, and then just finish, and then I'm gonna go inside the .jar file, double click as it is, Control A, and then Control C to copy, and then Control A to select everything, and then Control V to paste. Paste even the author's information. That's not my code. I just want it to run with the batch file. And then close. I'm done with the enum, and then create the class. Go down, Go down here, create the firework class. Firework. And remember here, there's no inheritance and stuff. You don't have to worry about, oh, there's inheritance, or this and that. Nah, you don't have to worry about that. There's no inheritance yet. And then select everything, copy, paste into this newly created file, and then done. And then create again another class, firework display, and then click finish, and then go to your jar file, copy everything. There it is. And then go to the jar file, paste, and then save. And then one more class, and then we are done. You should be able to run with the batch file. So class and then pyro tech should name it exactly the same way it was named, even the capitalization, the same way it was named in the Java in the .jar file. There we go. And then pyrotechnician, copy, paste. And then we are done. Let's just double check if it's still running. It should still run. They shouldn't affect Eclipse. There it is. There's the details. And we can also test the data file, right? A file that doesn't work. That's unclean. So it should say line 1 doesn't, yeah, line does not exist. You see, it didn't match with that line. And also we only read one thing. So it is working as intended. So I'm just gonna leave it with clean underscore one.txt. I'm just gonna leave it like that. So there's the code. Let's try to run into the batch file again. Let me close this and go back to my folder. Let me just go back and then double click. There's the build.batch file, right? The batch file, build.bat. So let's double click it again. Now it should be able to run. There we go, generating Java doc. Don't worry about the warning. And then there's your code. Your batch file is running perfectly. So whenever you're given a Java file, I would suggest you do that. You recreate everything, copy and paste, don't change everything. Don't change anything because that's not your intellectual property. It's someone's code. And the person did go so far as to include his credentials. So don't copy and paste and make his code your own. So that's it for today. That's the way that's the way you should have approached the practical. That's the memo for the practical. I will upload it on my Google Drive or OneDrive, and then generate a link, and then put the link on under the description on the video. So thank you guys. See you in the next session.